Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show we have
Lynn Morrison.
Yes, we do. And it was a great interview. And it's another one of our new author interviews. And right. Lynn started publishing Paranormal Cozies in 2019. Or did she start with Cozies? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think she did. Yeah. And she's started pretty recently. I don't remember if it was
I think it
19
was
or 20.
2019. Yeah. And yeah, it's really good. She talks about the cost now of doing this. Mm-hmm. Just grassroots newsletter building.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. And then she also talked about like how she found her editor and cover artist. Mm-hmm. And the other thing we talked about was like how she took her time with like before she launched. And this is something that Jami did too. She really built up her knowledge before she launched. So we talked about that. And it's just a really good interview. I'm enjoying these new author ones. I think they're lots of fun.
Yeah. And I was surprised. And then I'm like, why are you surprised, Jami, that you guys were really excited about these? Because I remember, and even now, when I hear someone at a conference talking about, their super successful publishing journey. And I realized, that they started publishing back in 2012 and then builds up a readership then when there were not very many people, and they've kept that readership, that I kind of go, but things are different now. Well, it's the same thing for you guys. And so I'm super glad that you are excited. And this is a great interview. Lynn is very entertaining. We just had a great time, and I think you're going to really love it. So what's been going on with you, Sara?
Well, this week I actually launched my first translation. It's on pre-order, so it's uploaded. Right. It's the French edition, which is probably not going to sell as well as the German edition, but I'm, like everything, I'm doing it for the long haul, and I'm figuring, I will earn my money back even if it takes a couple of years. So I did that. It's up on pre-order, and I did some ads for it. I'm doing just ads in the French Amazon store, and we'll see how that goes. And then I'm doing it wide because, Kobo is big in Canada, the big French-speaking population. So I'm going to try eventually, I'll try some ads on Kobo and see how, promotions on Kobo. So that was like my big thing for this week. And it was nerve-wracking. It's just like slightly terrifying to put it out when you can't read it. You've had it proofed and you've had the translation assessed. I used Reedsy, like we talked about a while back. I used Reedsy to check the translation assessment when I first started. Right. So, so it should all be good. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. It is one of those just let it go kind of things. Really, you can do what you can do. And then after that, you have to let it go. So.
Yeah. So it's out there, and so I'm doing a short, 7-day pre-order on that. And so I did that, and been doing a lot of, been doing some writing this week. I got kind of back into it, which is good. It still feels like it's going really slow, but I'm getting there. I'm keeping an eye at it. So,
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. Oh, and there was another cool thing that I found this week while I was writing. It's from, let me go to the site so I can get the name right. If you go to freethesaurus.com, it brings up a thing where you can search, you can do a search for a word. So today or the other day, I put in run or walk, and it's very cool because it brings up this visual. It's got run in the middle, and then it has all these branches that come off of it. And so different words like compete, race, flee, take part, continue. And then each one of those has words that branch off of it. So it's super visual, which I love. And then the synonyms are green, and they have a couple of antonyms thrown in there, and they're red. So it's just very visual. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Oh yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Because cool. You can only have them run, walk, dash,
shuffle their feet very fast. Yeah.
Then you need some new words. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So what's been going on with you?
Well, I am on Friday. So I did something different this time with this release. And y'all, I'm not sure. If I've done the right thing or not. So with every release prior to this one, I have put the book before it for free per David Gogren's, advice. David Gogren, my publishing religious leader. And so anyway, but I'm having someone help me with ads right now. And their suggestion was to not put Homecoming King for free because they said their reasoning was it was too early. But that book's a year old. And for me, that's not too early. But again, as I've said, when you ask for advice from people that and they take the time to think about it, then you should at least try it. So I tried it. And, the launch went well. I think it would have gone better or I might have had a better rank for the money I was spending had I put the book for free, but the rank was still good. So I'm still okay with that. But what I decided to do was wait. I waited just over a month, because the 30-day cliff,
right?
If it's a thing, I get. I mean, it is.
I think it's a thing.
It is a thing. I don't normally see a 30-day cliff like really falling off, but I think that's because I run ads pretty consistently, and that's why. But that's neither here nor there. So I waited just a little over a month. And Friday, the first book went free. So Homecoming King is free for 5 days, hoping to keep the launch momentum going for, another month. And so I was doing graphics and doing a bunch of stuff for that this week and getting ready for that. And so yesterday, I think I had 2,000 downloads, and I think I'm already at 1,500 today, but I have free books each day. So yesterday, I scheduled at least one promo every day, and I have some newsletter swaps going on. And then I didn't send my newsletter out yesterday because I had a couple of big people sending theirs out. Plus I had ENT. I think that's the only one I had yesterday. So I waited until today and I sent my newsletter out. And it will go out this afternoon. It's scheduled to go out this afternoon. So I'll let you know how it goes. If I just feel like there are the tried and true ways to do things, but it doesn't hurt to switch it up and try some new stuff. And so I'm trying some new stuff, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
That reminds me, this week I also did some just uploading of things and getting ready for my launch in January.
Right.
So I was double checking all my uploads, making sure all my files were good. And I discovered that if you're a white author and you're on Apple Books, they now have a form you can fill out to request promotion. So you have to go into it's the Apple Books, you would go in and you would choose promotion. It's not actually a promotion tab. It's a little bit hard to find. Right. So I will put a link to the main page, and then you have to scroll down to the bottom and it says, promotion ideas or promotion something. You click on that, and then there's a form that you can fill out, and you can say, hey, I have a sale. I have a new release coming.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's really nice because they're a little bit harder to get in touch with than some of the other vendors.
They are. They are. And I actually didn't even start anything yesterday because I was until yesterday afternoon, putting any things on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, because yesterday morning I was interviewed on the Not Your Average Lives podcast, which was cool. It's for women. It's women that start kind of new ventures midlife sort of thing.
How cool.
Yeah, it was great. I talked too much, I think, because, I don't get to talk to people anymore and I have a lot of words built up. And so I was a little worried about that, but she assured me it was fine. So that was fun. And then I went to see Dune, and oh my gosh, it was so good. So good.
good.
I loved it. So I've been waiting. I have not read the books, but I'm going to. But because I just wasn't sure, I do like sci-fi, but I don't read a lot of sci-fi. If I'm going to read like outside my genre, it's urban fantasy or fantasy. Right. But really Dune in a lot of ways, well, the movie anyway, it had some fantasy elements to it. I felt like, I mean, it's just so otherworldly, but it's mostly sci-fi. So I'm going to read the books, but oh gosh, it was good. It was really good. And then I came home and did that. But I just have to tell people right now, if you're on TikTok and you're not following and losing your mind laughing at Elise Myers on TikTok, then what are you doing with your lives? I mean, y'all, this woman is hilarious. And she's kind of gotten famous for the 100 taco story. She's so funny. And she's just such a funny storyteller. So anyway, the way she tells stories is amazing and really funny. So if you're on TikTok, you should at least watch some of her videos. Elise Myers, it's ELYSE and then MEYERS. So
okay, cool. Funny. Yeah. Well, 2 good story recommendations there. You're the second person I've heard say that Dune is really good.
Yeah, it was so good. I mean, I'll probably see it again. I mean, it's a 3-parter, but I'm
always kind of leery on the ones that are like super big blockbusters that have been based on something else. You're like, I just don't know. I always kind of wait a little bit to see what the consensus is.
Right. If it's a book, if it's a movie of a book I've never read, I tend to watch the movie and then read the book because I want to go with, especially if it's a big one like this, I want to go in with no expectations. So, but it was so intriguing, and you could just tell there was a ton of backstory and a ton of things that they probably couldn't deal with. That I'm like, oh, now I'm intrigued. I have to read it. So,
no, that's good.
It's
so
funny. I was walking into the movie yesterday, and my daughter called, and she said, I said, I can't talk. I'm walking into the movie. And she said, oh, what do you see? And I said, Dune. She said, what the butt is that? And I was like, have you lived under a rock for the last year? I mean, get out, girl.
She's a little busy.
She is busy. She's the one with 5 kids. So
yeah. There's like a whole section of time that I have no entertainment references for because I was busy with little toddlers. So I understand that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, we should get on with the interview, and then we should do a question.
Y'all,
so
I'm the worst. Yes, question. And we had a great question last week.
Yes, about newsletters and how you build a newsletter.
Yes, and you guys were great. You had some awesome
ideas.
Awesome
Jami's
ideas.
going to read one of the responses, and I'll just summarize. We had lots of newsletter builder, participating in newsletter builders to build your newsletter. Lots of people who, one person had used an organic pop-up on their website, which is, I'm using that too. It only took me 4 years to get it set up from when I heard the idea, but it does work. So that's a cool idea too.
That's the thing, y'all. People hate pop-ups, but they work.
Yeah,
statistically they work. So yeah.
So do you want to read Angel's?
Yes. Angel Lawson said, my co-author and I recently wrote a new magnet for our completed series, hoping to get readers from part 1 of the series over to part 2, which is really smart, y'all, because I don't know what the situation is, but I've actually thought about this because the first 2 books in my series, all 4 characters are in those books, but from 2 to 3, those characters are not in that book, and I do see a fall off. So that's a super smart way to kind of combine and tie the series together. So that was a really great idea.
Yeah, it's a good tip. Yeah. All right. So what should we ask this week?
So
we talked to Lynn about taking your time and kind of the guerrilla marketing tactics that she used to launch her book.
But what about this? What about where are you finding your cover artists and your editors?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be specifically like, this is the person's name.
No,
but like, how did you, I mean, you can if you want to give them a shout out and give them some business, but if like, how did you find them? Because that's a huge question.
And how did, especially like with the editors, like, how did you decide on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, because it is, it's kind of like finding a translator and assessing your translation.
Yes.
It's tricky.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we should get on with the interview then.
Yeah. Now we should get on with the interview. Since
okay.
I'm not walking over Sara.
All right. Here's Lynn. All right. Well, today we're really excited to talk to Lynn Morrison. Hi, Lynn. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we are very excited to have you.
So let me read your bio and we'll get started. Lynn Morrison lives in Oxford, England, along with her husband, 2 daughters, and 2 cats. Born and raised in Mississippi, her wanderlust attitude has led her to live in California, Italy, France, and the Netherlands. It's no surprise that she loves to travel with a never-ending wish list of destinations to visit. She is as passionate about reading as she is writing. It can almost always be found with a book in her hand. So I totally identify with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Lynn, tell us, how did you get into writing?
Yeah. So I don't have the traditional writer story. Like, I didn't write my whole life.
Me either.
There you go. That's all right. So I always say that writing, it always has been, and it continues to be like my life vest. When I feel like I'm drowning, writing is the thing that I retreat into. So the way I got started is that my husband and I, shortly after we got married, he got a job offer to move to the Netherlands. In Europe, we were living in San Francisco at the time, and he asked to delay his start date for a year. And they said, yeah, sure, that's fine. So I was like, well, I have to leave my job anyway. So it would totally make sense now to also have a baby, as one does. So, it was like, okay, well, we'll try for one. And of course, I get pregnant right away. And that's how I ended up moving to a country I had never set foot in before, with a 7-week baby in tow. And I didn't speak the language. And I had no job prospects because the job market in the Netherlands was terrible at the time. So I sat at home for kind of a year and tried to learn my way around, and eventually thought, how can there be like no resource here for parents like me? There's so many expats here, but everything was in Dutch. So I started writing to create a website for expat parents. And then from there, I moved into blogging. And then as my blogging friends started to move into books, I followed along, although they started their sort of full-time writing careers a lot sooner than I did.
Right.
That's how I got into it.
That's amazing. That's such a interesting route to take. I love that. I love that.
Well, tell us how you got into fiction writing and like how long it took you to write your first book and how that came about.
Yeah. So as I said, I started in blogging, and I was doing sort of the typical parenting blog. And I worked with this fantastic editor who would rip apart my scenes and would really sort of teach me to look at things in a new way. And I started to stray into fiction within my parenting blogs, because I would think, well, what's the message that I really want to convey to parents today? And what's the best story that would tell it? And often it was like, might have been influenced by something that happened, but I would fictionalize a whole scene in my head about, this happened and blah, blah. And from there, I took away this great life lesson. And I wrote up a post like that, and it went crazy viral, like was on the Today Show Parents website, million views. And it was a complete fiction. I mean, it was like a very touching moment, but that moment hadn't happened. But that moment was the perfect moment to describe what I wanted people to learn. And I really, was like, oh, well, that fiction thing worked out well there.
Maybe you should lean into that, huh?
More of that. Yeah. So, I just started crafting more and more fiction. And before I knew it, my friends, some of my blogging friends were like, oh, we're thinking about doing this NaNoWriMo thing. Why don't you give it a go with us? And we all started to do NaNoWriMo in 2015, so a long time ago. I did it with 2 authors, Kristen May and Megan O'Flynn. And yeah, it was crazy. I just wrote every night, and I had always sworn I don't have a book in me, but lo and behold, I had a book in me that came out under the constraints of NaNoWriMo. I have never published that book. I'm still working on that book. So my first novel's like never really done, but I've published sort of 9 or whatever it is since then.
Wow.
Which just goes to show you don't have to publish the first one you do, right?
Right. But when did you publish your first book?
I published it in May 2020, 31st of May 2020. There's nothing like publishing a book right in the middle of a global pandemic when everyone in the world is in lockdown. And it was when all the race situations started happening in the States. So it was like, I had reached out to a bunch of my friends. Will you help me promote my book? And they all said yes. And we were all lined up and everything blew up. And none of us said, it doesn't feel right to promote a book right now. So it was, very much a bumpy start, but it was the right thing to do at the time. And I just kept going. I guess I didn't,
so 9 books.
Didn't mean it fell over.
So 9 books in what?
A year and a half.
18 months. Yeah. So how many do you, we sent Lynn questions and I'm straying from them. So, here we go. But how often do you publish?
I try and publish every kind of 2-3 months. That is my goal. I have had a longer stretch in between there. But yeah, that I can, it took me 5 years. I'm still working on that first book that I did, but now I can do probably a 75K book in 6-7 weeks is how long it takes me to write it and edit it.
Wow. That's amazing. That's great. So what was your marketing plan when you started, besides your friends helping you and then everything blowing up? So
I come from a business background. I spent 20 years working in marketing. I was like, this should be totally in the bag for me because I should just know it all, right? Even though you don't, I worked for an energy company. So knowing how to market energy is quite different from knowing how to market a book. But that said, I knew enough about the tactics and I was I tried to be very realistic in setting milestones and goals. So with the first book, I was like, I had planned to write 4 books in that series, and I was going to sort of rapid release them every couple of months. And I said, this first book is proof of concept. Will anyone read what I've written? If they do read it, will they like it or not? Will I get a whole bunch of terrible reviews and I'll need to rethink my life plan? Or will it do okay enough to sort of say, put out the second book and does that do okay and kind of grow from there? So I did a lot of grassroots marketing with the first book. I joined all the sort of like cozy reader Facebook groups. I started engaging in them a couple of months before the book came out. I wanted people to know my face, to know I was an active member of the community. And then when the book came out, it was like everybody could celebrate with me rather than me being somebody random who just popped in and threw up a post. And I did a fussy librarian because that was cheap. But it worked in getting my name out there. And then when the second book came out, so that was middle of July last year, I decided to be crazy and apply for a book bub. Which I thought there's no way I'll ever get a book bub, but they gave me an international book bub, which is still super exciting. So I took the international book bub and sold a lot of copies and saw a read through. My books are in KU, so I read through into the second book, which was great. So I was like, okay, keep going. Right? This is going fine. Just keep paddling, look like you're smooth sailing, but underneath there's a lot of.
Right.
Yeah. Did you write both the book? Did you write one book at a time or did you hold books?
No, I did. I think I had the first book and half of the second done by the time I launched the first book. I had this big master plan when I started in January that I was going to write all 3 and then rapid release them once a month. And I didn't factor in a pandemic and homeschooling and everybody being stuck in the house. And so I had to adjust my plan from there. But I didn't have, I had quit my job and I was fully into the full-time writer. So at least I didn't have that competing for my time. I had everything else competing for my time, but not a job as well.
Wow, that was a big leap.
It was a big leap. It was a big leap, but it was a calculated leap. As I said, we had lots of life things happen to us in 2019. It was quite a terrible year for us. We had a, death in the immediate family. My job went sideways. I changed jobs. That one was terrible. And it was just like one of those moments where you stop and take stock of your life and say, is this really what I want to be doing? Why are we going after, the climbing the career ladder and I'm never at home. And is this, we're earning all this money that we never spend. And is this worth it? No, let's do something different.
Good.
So I knew I could do kind of marketing consulting on the side. So I sat down with my husband and said, what's the minimum amount I have to earn to keep the family going on top of what he earns? And we figured out what that number was. And as long as I hit that number, I can keep doing this.
Right. Very good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, what do you know now that you wish you had known when you started?
I think what I wish I'd known back then is that it's okay to go big on the launch of a first book. I kind of wish I'd gone a bit bigger in getting my name out there, because then by the time I got the confidence to really say, hey, world, here's my book, I really want to tell you about it. It had been out for 6-8 months. It wasn't a new release anymore. And some of the doors that would have been open to me felt like they were closed. That might be wrong, but it's just balancing out, I think, that new author lack of confidence, either in yourself or the product or how much money you can really afford to put into things. And will any of this generate a return with, once you've done it a few times going, I don't need to have 4 books to earn out the investment that I'm going to put in here. So I wish I'd gone in a bit bigger and done things like posted on NetGalley for review and some of the other, just to help early on build a buzz about the book. I didn't do any of that.
Did you go wide with your books, or did you go into KU when you started?
I went straight into KU. I'm a big KU binge reader. I have been for a long time. So I was like, I want to serve my people, which are me.
Know your market, right?
Exactly. I am very much my market.
So I'm going to add a question here, because about market, like, how did you know? Did you do market research? I mean, how did you know where your readers would be?
So summer of 2019, I started to get it in my head that I wanted to write full time. And that first book I had written had been, I don't know, like a loosely based memoir, kind of romancy women's fiction, didn't fit neatly into any niche. And so I was like, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to write something different. What is the other thing that I love to read? It's cozies, and particularly paranormal cozies.
Yeah.
I have read so many of them. So I binged through, I think, 20 books on our summer holiday, just gobbling them down as quickly as I could, but looking at them less from this is a fun story and an enjoyable way to pass the afternoon, and more into the like, okay, well, what are they doing here? And how are they structuring these things? And what are the, conventions and the tropes? So I studied all that first and had a good sense of that. And I could see those books were selling well. So I knew there had to be a market there. And so then I just started to search around on Facebook, cozy reader groups, and I found more and more and more. And as I said, I joined them straight away. I really watched to see what people were talking about. And just eventually kind of got the confidence. Yes, I can go do this. There's definitely a readership there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. So what do you, where did you find your editor and your cover designer? Yeah.
So I made a super newbie mistake that worked out well, which is I hired 2 friends. So I hired a friend who is a professional graphic designer, but had never done covers before. And I hired a friend who does copy editing sort of on the side of her day job was like being a digital marketer. So I had confidence in their abilities, but they didn't know the tropes, the beats, the, cover conventions, that kind of stuff. And I think the fact that it all worked out as well as it did is as much a testament to their like desire to see me succeed. It felt like this group effort that we were all doing. So they went and studied up, my graphic designer studied all the covers and looked at this. And, I think 10 drafts before we got to the end, I was like, yeah, I'm totally happy with these. And she's like, no, I'm still not happy, and 10 more drafts later, she's like, no, I'm happy with it, so that worked out well. That could have so easily gone sideways on and she's I stuck with that graphic designer for that series, but as I've moved on to other series, I have gone with more professional cover designers who have more expertise in the cozy genre or in the paranormal women's fiction genre, just because it was faster to work with them. I didn't have to like do the teaching or the learning along with them.
Yeah. Well, what has been your biggest surprise?
My biggest surprise, I think it's really how incredibly supportive the indie author community is. And I kind of knew this because I had come from the blogging background and I had been in all the blogging groups, and I knew how much women were doing behind the scenes to help one another up. And, I'll share your stuff and you share mine. And we're just all in the trenches together. So I should have not come as a surprise to me that the indie author community was the same. But I think that the difference is that you can see that indie authors are obviously helping each other out if you just pay attention to what they're doing on their social media channels, or, if you read the acknowledgments in the back of the book. But once you start to get deeper into it and you make that step where you're like, this is something I'm going to do, and it's going to account for either a significant portion of my income or all of my income, you really discover like another group of very serious indie author writers who will just blanket share everything. And that is incredible to come from a business background where you're like constantly trying to hide things from the competition. It's been the exact opposite. People are so transparent. Don't do this. This is the return I got. This is how much I'm making this year, but this is how much I invested. And you really can benchmark what you're doing.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. In romance, same way. It's just, there's some outliers that are a little bit on the competitive side, but for the most part, it's super, super supportive. And I just love that.
I think this podcast is a good example, and there's several other podcasts where it's like, you guys are just passionate about giving back. And so you host these sessions, and there's so many authors that feel the same way. And so they come on and everybody just wants to share and lift everybody else up. And, if you just dig a little bit, there is so much there, more than you could ever imagine would be there to help you along the way.
Right. Yeah. Sara and I have, we say this all the time, and this is how we got our indie publishing education is through podcasts. And so we just want to make sure that everybody has the chance to hear the things we heard and then the new things. So I think that that's super important for us.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest thing and what's been the best thing about publishing your book, indie publishing your book?
I think the hardest thing I've learned is the phrase, your mileage may vary. And you guys have touched on that before. And you see everybody with the YMMV. And the first time I saw it, I had to go Google it up because I didn't know what it meant. But once I figured it out, it was like, oh, yes. And the way that's really come through with me is as I've started to get deeper in the indie author community and make these connections, and people start to, sort of like pull back the curtain and reveal, either the incredible success they're having or the dirty laundry that they're hiding behind the curtain or whatever it is. It's so easy to fall into the state of comparison and really like killing your mojo by just suffering from comparison-itis. Like, oh, well, we all launched books at the same time, and why is so-and-so's book doing so much better than mine? I don't understand it. And rather than being like, this book has done the best any of my books have done, I should be celebrating this. And instead I'm kicking myself because I didn't do as well as, Jill Blogs over there, or Jill Blogs, or whoever it is. Right. And that's so silly. And I know that intellectually, but emotionally, it's almost like it's a different situation, right? You're like, I know I shouldn't do this, but I will still lose an hour over here being mad about comparing myself to someone else. And that is a really hard lesson to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for us, because we have ranking in the stores and, we can see how books are doing, it's a little bit different because in most industries, you have to go out and do market research. It's a little bit harder to find out how your competition is doing in some ways. And it's very easy to look at the top 100 or whatever and go, oh, that's, not where I hoped my book would be. It's really, it can be really hard. So,
Yeah. And I don't know if there'll ever come a day where I look at someone doing really well and go, like, my immediate response will be, oh, that's so great for them. I think there will always be that little dip of, oh, and then I come back up and I clap for them.
Yes,
I want
exactly.
that to be the case, but I'm just not sure I'm made that way. So, and I don't know
think,
that
well,
many
we're all
of us
human.
are. Yeah.
We're all human. And so, what's the hardest thing and the best thing is they're tied together. Is learning that your mileage may vary and sort of saying, well, I'm going to take the good that I can figure out what they did and I can learn from their mistakes and I can get better. And, someday I'll have that success if I just keep working hard and balancing that out with okay, let's celebrate this win, even if it's not as big as her win or his win. Right. It's my win, and it's precious, and I've got to protect it, and be happy with it
because it's my win that affects me. Yeah. Their win doesn't really affect, or it affects me emotionally if I let it, but other than that, it doesn't affect me. It's my win that affects my bottom line, my career, all of the things, my influence, everything. So that's the one we should concentrate on for sure.
Yeah. To say, hard to do that.
Oh, so hard.
Well, have you had to make any mindset shifts as you've come along in the publishing journey?
Yes. The first one for me was that going from writing is fun to writing is now my job. And, I'm still going through that, I think. And it's so hard because you read so many things where someone will say, you've just got to have your butt in your chair and you've got to churn out your word count for the day. Mm-hmm. But I know that if I do that, I will delete the whole word count at the end of the day if I'm just not feeling it. Like, yes, I've done 1,000 words and those will go promptly into the trash can. It's like learning your own style and recognizing that that's okay. And maybe actually the time I need to take is to think or go read a book and get some inspiration or take a walk or whatever it is. And if I don't do my 1,000 words today, I haven't failed as a writer, that is still a big mind shift because there are days where you do have the thought clear in your head and you know what you have to do and you don't want to do it and you have to sit down and do it, and that's a big mindset shift.
Yeah. So paranormal cozies, that is a tough genre to break into. And you've done it. You're making good money at what you're doing. So how did you break into that genre? We talked about market research and stuff, but it seems like there's more than that.
I think, I don't know whether what I did set me up for success at the time. It felt like a bit of a mistake. The things that I read in the paracozy genre were all the witch cozies. And there are so many fantastic witch cozy writers, and I just loved those. But I didn't want to do like somebody else's story. I felt like I needed to put my own stamp on it. Mm-hmm. And I ended up coming up with this idea that wasn't a witch cozy at all. The girl's not a witch. There is magic. There are ghosts. It's kind of more Harry Potter-esque, and there's paintings that come to life and ghosts that walk the halls that help you and fantastical creatures, but she's not a witch. So it doesn't hit any of the traditional witch, vampire, werewolf, shifter, whatever tropes that are the norm in paranormal cozies. But what it does do really well is it somehow bridges this gap between contemporary stories and contemporary characters and that real sense of history that you typically get with a British cozy. I did so much research and I set it in Oxford in the colleges, which I know very well. And I took lots of inspiration from the actual historical actions that took place at the colleges. And, so that gives my stories this depth that they probably wouldn't have if I had just invented it all myself. And so it's weird because the cozy, I think they've done well because they rank well in paranormal cozy, but they also rank well in the historical mystery chart, even though they're a contemporary setting, which is kind of a weird one. I think it just made it just different enough that it kind of caught people's eye.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think that speaks to the cozy audience in that the paranormal cozy audience, in that while they do love a witch cozy, that it's such a voracious group of readers that they're willing to take a chance on something that's close. Yes. I think. But I have zero experience, but that's what it sounds like. So take that for what you will. But But that's what it sounds like to me. And, that they're just such a voracious group of readers that, and I do know that to be true. So that's awesome that you took that chance and it worked out for you.
It could have gone awry. It felt like I was trying to do something to ask him those things, right? It just worked out, I think, because it was just sort of just British enough, even though I'm American, and just paranormal enough, even though it's not a witch, and just historical enough that it kind of fits that. So it pulled in readers. I mean, it's so interesting. In my Facebook reader group, I have a lot of readers in there that said, I've never read a paranormal cozy until I read yours. And they picked it up because they were like, oh, I love Oxford and I love all the description you do of the colleges and I love the history and the British setting. And so it seems to have like attracted a different demographic, one that hasn't normally read paranormal cozies. Of course, now they all love paranormal cozies. It was like their gateway drug into the world of paranormal cozy. But, the more the merrier. So
that's right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is a really crowded genre. So if you have something that can differentiate yourself and help you stand out, because the covers, this happens too, like in the food cozies, that like they're very similar. A lot of them, it's easy to get mixed up on, have I read this or have I not? So if you have just a little something different, it's the same, but it's different, it's like that can help you stand out. So that's very, very good that you did that, I think.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I mean, I think my, my cover designer, as I said, she didn't come from the book cover background. And so when we started to look at potential cover options, she was sending me stuff that was like fantasy. And I was like, yes, I love that, but that's not the right genre. But I think all that digging around she did outside of the normal sandbox that we would play in branched out our minds a little bit to think, well, how do we make this look cozy, but also British, but also, not the stuff that we don't like about the cozy covers. And, I think it just, that all came together nicely with the covers that we ended up with in the end.
Yeah. Well, it worked out well, obviously. So, well, talk to us a little bit about we're going to talk about the real cost of launching a writing career in 2021. So there are a lot of misconceptions about how much it costs to launch a book. Some people think it's outrageously expensive. And some people, think you can do it for very, very cheap. So kind of talk to us about how much the price range you feel is like normal for an indie author in 2021.
Yeah. So nowadays, everyone says it, and it is so true. You cannot launch a book without a professional cover and having it professionally edited. And that means you probably need at least $1,000 to get yourself out of the gate. And that'll get you sort of one round of editing thereabouts, and one cover that might be, a cover that you buy off the shelf, or one that you do without too many amends. So, investing a little bit, but not crazy amounts. And then you've got to have an ad budget. But it doesn't have to be a crazy amount. So, maybe you want to have a couple of $100s or something like that. But I was talking with a friend recently, and I said, you should absolutely, you write so quickly and you write well, you should go indie with your books. She's like, oh, I can't do that because it's going to cost me $5,000 or $10,000.
Oh my gosh.
Who have you been talking to? That number is ridiculous. But, and that's the kind of misconception, is there's two camps of people who go, well, I'll just slap some cover on it. And I won't have I'll use, Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, which are great, but won't replace a real person. Yeah. And I'll do it super on the cheap and it'll be fine. I'll sell loads. You won't. And people who go, I'm going to go and pay a vanity publisher, or I've got to pay someone a lot of money to, do the layout of my book, and a book cover is going to cost me $1,000. And, you can pay that money, but you don't have to. So I think it's about being sort of upfront with yourself in the beginning and say, I'm going to need however long it takes me to write this book. And that's your time, which has a value. And then maybe $1,500 to make sure that it gets off on the right foot. And that's, I think, sort of a reasonable thing to kind of get in your head that you're going to spend and get comfortable with spending, so that you're not counting your pennies. Right. And then being realistic about how long it's going to take to earn back out.
Right.
Which might be a week if you're fantastic and you hit the top of the charts, and it might be 6 months.
Right. And I think that, if you have skills that you can barter for? I mean, this has been a big discussion on TikTok, and I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole, but I will say that an editor is your friend. If you can work that out, if there's any way you can make that money or barter for that service, then you should do that. You should try to do that. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard when you finish the book and you're like, I've got this book and I want to put it up, but you got to look long term. I mean, that's the whole thing about this. Another thing about ads budget, and I rarely suggest this, but launching a book at 99 cents so that you can pay for those small newsletter promos like Fussy Librarian. Bargain Booksy is a little bit more expensive. ENT's kind of in the middle, but those will give you exposure. And at 99 cents, you can get some good eyes on those books if you're new and you don't have money for ads, but you want to try to get your book seen. Again, I'm rarely a proponent for a 99 cent launch, but that is one way to do it if you have a limited budget. So
I totally agree.
Even $2.99, you can still get in those newsletter promos. You're just going to get more eyes on you if you're at 99 cents than if you're at $2.99.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have my first in series of the Oxford series, sort of permanently priced at 99 cents. I want to make it, there's still so many people that have never heard of me, and I want to make it a total no-brainer. Either you've got Kindle Unlimited and it's basically free, or it's less than $1, dive in, and I depend on the rest of the series to earn out the money that I put into the advertising. It generates a good return, and that's great. But I want to go back to your editor point. So I paid my friend to edit my book, and I paid my friend to do the cover design because I felt like I didn't want them. This was my risk, and it wasn't their risk to take. That said, I had another friend, that editor who had worked with me, way back at the start of my career and has known me for, 100 years, we sort of jokingly say. And she did the dev editing, and she didn't charge me a penny for that. She read the whole book. She came back and said, these are all the things that are wrong with it. Restart and start fixing these things. And I'll read it a chapter at a time. And she still does that. She still reads every book I write a chapter at a time as I put it out. And we barter. Now she's started writing books, and I do the same for her. And I do all the, print layout, and I post them to all the stores for and do all that legwork for her, so she doesn't have to deal with it. And I totally believe in bartering, but just make sure that both sides get something out of it.
Right. Exactly.
But if you can find those, I mean, God, that's like magic, having a dev editor on call that will read my chapters every other day, however fast to churn them out, and give me feedback right away. And it doesn't cost me anything. And that means I can use the budget that I do have set aside for things that I just can't barter for, like space in the Fussy Librarian. I could barter I could barter until I had no voice left, but they're still going to say, I'm really sorry, it's $19.
We want your money. Yeah.
We only take PayPal and credit cards, right?
Yeah. That's lovely then. It's $19,
Well, let me just point out that when she says dev edit, she's talking about a developmental editor or content editor. And then also I know that most of our listeners know this, but for anyone new popping into this episode, you should never pay anyone to publish your book.
Oh God, yes.
In my opinion. And I think that my opinion goes pretty much across the board with most indie authors.
Yes.
There are companies that will take advantage of someone who has a book or wants to write a book. And what makes me so sad is it's usually older people because they have a memoir or something like that. And granted, an older person is probably not going to invest the time and everything to learn indie publishing, but you should not have to pay someone to publish your book. And a lot of times you will not get what you're paying for. Like you're paying for quote unquote editing, and you're not getting good editing. So, if you have questions, Sara and I are available in our Facebook group, Wish I'd Known Then for Writers, and you can pop in and ask questions. But do not pay somebody to publish your book. Even traditional publishers you do not pay.
You don't pay
a legitimate publisher would not take money from you. So
yeah, a legitimate publisher either gives you an advance or you agree not to take an advance in lieu of future royalties.
Correct.
And there's lots of companies out there that they are preying on people's, basically their hopes and dreams. And a lot of times you lose your rights if you go with these companies. So, just be very, very careful. If it sounds like a lot of money, it probably is not a great deal because as Lynn was saying, $1,500 to $2,000, you can do it yourself. And that is a big amount of money. But if you're looking at this as a career, like compared to any other business, that's really low overhead, to get started. I mean, you do have your investment of time, but most people are, writing on their lunch hour, while they hold down another job or something.
Right.
So, it is a significant amount of money, but in the big picture, it's really not,
Right.
So,
and I'm an outside the box thinker. Like I'm like, tell your friends and family for Christmas, I want money to go to my publishing, venture. Or for my birthday, just give me money and put it in the publishing account. And I mean, there are just things you can do outside the box.
Right.
If you know it's coming, which if you're writing a book and you plan on publishing, it's coming. So just make those adjustments. And I know we all are busy. We all have kids. We all have jobs. We all have tight budgets. But you can, there are just things that can be done. And I'll stop there because
we have to treat it like a business. Even if you're not everybody to use it like a business. Still not treat it seriously like a business.
Yeah. Right.
But one thing that I see a lot people ask in, big indie author groups like 20 books to 50K or, Alessandra Torres's group. And people will come in and say, when should I start, talking to potential readers about my book? And that's such a common question. And it's good that they're there, but I think people need to be thinking, when they start thinking I'm going to write a book, that's when they need to be getting involved in the indie author community really early on. So by the time they're like, hey, I need an editor for my book, and anybody give recommendations, you start to get a bunch of recommendations. They're vetted. You have multiple price points that you can look at, or you connect with someone who's like, I really need a copy editor. Hey, me too. Let's swap each other's. You're back to the bartering. But you have all that time to learn and make connections and figure out your way. So by the time you're like, okay, I got a draft, I'm ready to send this to someone, you aren't going, where do I find an editor? And I think that's when people start to fall prey to the, predators that are out there and wanting to take advantage of those people. And it's because they're just lost and overwhelmed and they feel this time pressure, rightly or wrongly, because they're holding a manuscript in their hand. Like, what am I going to do with this?
Right.
So I think the advantage of having started on the book journey in 2015 and waited to publish my first one until 2020 is I spent 5 years sitting in the back row of a whole bunch of different, indie author groups or like the romance writer groups or, watching Megan's journey and Kristen's journeys and seeing what they learned along the way. So by the time I got there, I knew what I was doing.
Right.
And I think that's really important is just get involved super early on.
I agree. I always say the best time to start your indie platform, your writer platform is yesterday. I always say that. But let's talk real quick about newsletters. Did you start a newsletter? Do you have a newsletter? How did you build your newsletter, if you have one?
Yes, I have a newsletter. I started it really early on.
Good.
Really early on. And I started it. What did I do? I think in the beginning, I just set it up and started trying to join some like story origin promos and things like that, doing newsletter swaps. Then I offered a bonus chapter or a short story that sort of fell in between the books in the back of book one to entice people over. And of course, when you're just getting started and you're selling like 100 copies, you might get one, but that's one,
Yeah, absolutely.
You just get going. So then I took the first 3 chapters of the book and I offered them for some of the newsletter builders and Book Funnel and in Story Origin. And I did, what's the one where you can pay in? Is it Ryan Z?
Ryan Z.
Yeah. So I did one of those just, getting a few hundred here and a few hundred there, sort of to join into some of the other cozy, organized newsletter builders that were going on. And then I finally wrote a proper like novella newsletter book standalone in November of last year. And I offered that up, and I used that as a newsletter builder for, I think, 3 months, did a whole bunch of like book funnel promos to get people in. And that got my list up to a couple thousand, which was a good enough number to start, making it easier to do newsletter swaps and that sort of thing. It was enough for people to take me seriously. And then I took that novella and I took it out of the newsletter builder and I published it as book 5 in my cozy series. And it's like a standalone with a side character, but I published it at 99 cents and added it onto the end of my series, and it sells a few every day and paid for the cover that was no money. And great.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, I want to loop back to talking about series, because you said you have multiple series now, right?
Yes.
So, did you finish off your first series and start a new one, or are they open-ended? How did you work that?
Yeah. So the first series I had planned for a 4-book arc, and I finished those first 4 books before I did anything, which was good because that series didn't really take off until the 4th book came out. When that 4th book came out and I put money into ads and a big stack, newsletter stack promo, my income definitely leveled up that month and then stayed leveled up, up until now. And that was really good. So I'm glad I did that. And then I decided I was really captivated by the paranormal women's fiction genre, probably because I'm a middle-aged woman that likes the idea of magical things. You could have guessed. So I just had this little voice in the back of my head that was like, you need to write a PWF. You really need to do this. And so I sort of parked my cozy series and split off and did a paranormal women's fiction. So I've done 2 of those, and the 3rd one should come out early next year. So that's how I got my 2nd series going. And then the 3rd one was a bit of a random that I was not in any of my plans, but sometimes when you see an opportunity, you just have to jump on it. Yep. So through the paranormal women's fiction venture, I learned that Robin Peterman runs, she does them twice a year, and she launches books that are all written in her magic and mayhem universe. So every book is like a standalone. It's, fully branded with my name. It doesn't have her name on it. It has a little magic and mayhem circle. But she helps to promote them to all of her readers of that universe. And I thought, what better way to get my name out there than to team up with someone who is well known to paranormal cozy readers, is well known to paranormal women's fictions readers, has a captive audience. And she would be willing, if I take part in this, to tell people that I exist. So I emailed her out of the blue and said, I don't know how often you recruit people for this, but whenever you do the next one, I'd love the opportunity to pitch an idea to see if I could take part. And I was like very businesslike when I sat down to write my email and, put in all the stuff, and I've read all the books, and she knew, that I knew who she was and was serious. Yes. And she came back and she said, how about October? And I was like, okay, October to pitch an idea. She's like, no, could you have a book for October?
Wow.
Yes. Well, no, she said October or June of next year, but I'm like, strike while the iron's hot. Yeah, I could not figure out any way to make my Oxford series cross over, because hers is very witch, vampire, werewolf. And I was like, that's not my series. So I have to do something new. So I came up with something new to fit that. And it's a witch cozy, but the witch is a vampire. So that was my own little twist that I put on it to make it a bit more fun and feel like me. But yeah, so I started another series, and it seems to be hitting the mark well with people who like the witch cozy. So, I was like, I'll learn from my mistake and I'll do something that really feels like it hits the witch cozy niche. And that's just getting started. We'll see how it goes.
That's fantastic.
But none of the series are closed off. So I'm working on another book in my Oxford series now, mainly because people kept commenting on my ads that are running and saying, when is the next book coming? So then you start to go, when is that next book?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe you should start that book, huh?
I better come up with an idea for that book. No, so I've got sort of like another trio of those planned, but we'll see how they go.
Right. Yeah. That's great.
I don't know. It's weird. I spent my whole life thinking I don't have a book in me. And now I'm like, this would be a cool idea for a book. I don't have time to write this book.
Right.
Yeah. I think that happens. Like once you start thinking and you start getting ideas, then, it's just like you can't turn it off. And there's so many, and people who come to you and say, "Oh, I have a great idea for a book." I'm like, "You just keep that. I don't."
Yeah,
need,
I got enough.
I don't need
I got
it.
a laundry list here. I could not get through.
Or I'll say, "I'm booked until 2025." So come back and talk to me later in my own mind of the things I want to write. Yeah.
Sarah would never say that out loud.
No,
I would say,
but I'm thinking it.
Keep it to yourself, sister. No, I wouldn't either. So, Lynn, tell us what you think the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success has been.
Oh God, I mean, it's following along with stuff for 5 years before I put a book out.
Yeah,
I feel like I did a PhD in indie publishing before I had anything to publish.
Mm-hmm.
But that meant I just hit the ground, 10 steps ahead of any other beginning indie author that I talked to. They were still trying to find their way. And I was like, I know I need to book this and this, and I need this person, and I've got to look at this, and I need a business plan. I'm going to need money to invest up front. I'm going to treat this like a business. And, a lot of that learning process that early career authors have to go through, I went through, but before I had a book.
Right. That's awesome. I think that's perfect advice and a great note to end on. We have enjoyed having you here so much. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun. I'm a huge fan of the show. So it's
thank you.
It's an interesting twist. I think I emailed Jami. I think I emailed you about this one time that I had met you on the Clubhouse coffee and chat calls at the 8 in the morning. And I'd listened to those for a long time. And then that was how I got into listening to the podcast. And I found myself one day listening to the podcast and looking for the unmute button so I could ask you a question before realizing I was listening to the podcast and not a Clubhouse call. And therefore that unmute button wasn't there. Anyway, but that's really fun. And I think a great thing about the indie author community is you can find people all over the place.
You can.
And sometimes with the unmute button and sometimes not.
Exactly.
Well, where can people find out more about you and your books?
You can find out more about me on my website, which is lynnmorrisonwriter.com.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. Well, we will have that link in the show notes, and those will be at wishidknownthenpodcast.com. And just thanks so much for being here. It's been great to talk to you.
Oh my gosh. No, thank you guys.
We were so glad to talk to you. This has been lots of fun. So,
are you doing any other early career authors?
Yes, we're doing a whole kind of series.
Cool. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. So you'll be one of at least 3, possibly 4. So
Awesome.
It was a great idea.
I can't wait to hear what the others have to say.
Yeah. Lynn kind of kicked this idea off, I think. Was it Lynn that gave us the email about maybe do some new authors? So this has been really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I'll let you ladies go because I know you probably have other things to get onto, but I think one thing that has struck me is the number of times when I've said, like, what advice would you give to an early career author? And how does it differ from like what you do now? And so many 10-year-in authors will say, well, it's just exactly the same. Anytime you launch a first in series or a new pen name, it's, we're all in the same boat. And I'm like, but you're not, because you've got 10 years of learning behind you that I don't have. And there are going to be questions that I have that won't be questions for you. Like, when should I invest in an audiobook? Or when should I do these things? And they're like, well, you just obviously do it when you do da-da-da. I'm like, that's not obvious to me.
It's very true.
It is true.
Yeah.
It is true.
Yeah. Well, I think this will be really helpful.
I do too.
Good.
I hope so.
Yeah. So
it's helpful to me.
Yeah. It's been great to talk to you, though.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I've enjoyed
See you
myself.
later. And thanks to Alexa Warburg for editing and producing the podcast. And we'll see everybody next week. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.